Discussion with Tongs Hao. He's a senior fellow with the Nuclear Policy Program and Carnegie, China. Hello, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's a real honor, and I'm just an independent researcher. So I think my goal today here is to collectively work with all of you together so we can better understand China and its implications for the region and for the world.
The panels since morning have been very rich and very broad. We talked global. We talked a lot about US and the Middle East. And as one of us was saying a little while ago, we tend to be swamped with our Middle East problems. In this panel, we'd like to discuss China and the global scene and maybe explain China more in the Middle East and its engagement or lack of it in the region. It's Donald Trump's second presidency. One might say it's Donald Trump's era and possibly a new foreign policy for the US. Global priorities are also shifting. How has this shaped China's approach to the international order?
I think for China, there are two important implications. For one, China really understands the nature of international relations from a structural realist perspective. Right? It really cares about the relative balance of power as the driving and shaping factor. And under Trump, China detects an acceleratingly declining United States simply because of perceived chaos in strategic decision making in the White House, seemingly incompetence in many issue areas to achieve American strategic objectives. So overall, many Chinese strategists have concluded that the United States is really accelerating its decline. So that has huge implications for China. For one, it increases China's more assertive or confident approach in dealing with the United States and rest of the world. We see China in the geoeconomic areas more willing and confident to use its own leverage to push for its own agenda using rare earth resources, etc., its own export control rules to advance its interest in geopolitical areas. China is more willing to punish those actors that it views as challenging China's core interest. A recent example is China's very heavy response to Japan Prime Minister Takaichi's comments about Taiwan. So that's one important lesson China is learning from the Trump administration, giving China more confidence. Second is President Trump appears to be less interested in ideological confrontation. That's, we have heard this word music to the ear multiple times today. And for China, it's simply too good to be true. And of course, China wants to see how much this will be sustained during the rest of the Trump administration and even after Trump administration. But it really resolves a fundamental concern for China. The reason China has been really focusing on the United States in its strategic planning is the United States presents an existential threat to the United States, to China from the Beijing's perspective. And that's very much because the ideological divergence, this described fights between democracies and autocracies. China highlights the importance of political security, regime security, but now all of that appears to be very much de-emphasized. So it opens this possibility that US-China relationship might become less zero-sum. So I think that has huge implications. Maybe we could see a more deconfliction when it comes to US-China coordination in certain regional affairs.
You say, and you've written many times, that China views that the US is on the decay or on the decline. How does China view the world order? it's a multipolar world or still a unipolar world? It's wishful thinking and actual realistic assessment of the world order.
So far, China has been focusing on addressing increasing risk of instability. President Xi has emphasized that we are experiencing major chaos that haven't been seen over hundreds of years. So China has been in a very self-defensive position, trying to build resilience, trying to build self-reliance to better hedge against even bigger strategic uncertainties and instabilities. It hasn't really think forwardly about how to construct, how to promote greater regional stability and international stability. Many of China's strategic initiatives, I think, reflect this thinking. China, promoted many abstract, high-level principles for a more stable world order, starting with this long-standing belief that economic development is the foundation for political stability and security. That's embedded in its efforts to promote Belt and Road Initiative, better economic connectivity. And beyond that, China hasn't really demonstrated very concrete ideas, except this principle of indivisible security. And it believes that simply by promoting more communication between nations, between civilizations, we'll be better able addressing each other's concerns. It has attributed most instability to U.S. hegemonic interest, and it seems to believe that as U.S. influence declines, there will be less instability overall. But how exactly China can play a role in driving that process is less thought about so far.
You write in Foreign Affairs in May 2025, as the United States global authority fades rapidly, a point you've been reiterating, international, or that's how China thinks, international pressure on China to join arms control talks will diminish. Moreover, Beijing sees the US defense industrial base as faltering, hampered by an increasingly disordered governance system. Trump's posturing, including his commitment to maintain the world's most powerful military and his proposal to build a Golden Dome missile defense system, no longer rattles Beijing as it once did. Can you elaborate more? Is this gap to be filled by China? Does China think that as the US declines, it will fill this gap? And probably it's belittling a lot too much the defense and the military systems of the US. Is this a dangerous game?
I think that exactly reflects China's thinking about stability versus instability. It thinks that the source of instability is US overwhelming power. So as a result, China is responding by conducting its own peace through strength strategy or stability through strength strategy. The reason one important reason China is comprehensively modernizing its military power, including nuclear power, is that President Xi seems to believe that if, the only way for China to compel the United States and US-led Western countries to accept peaceful coexistence with China, to respect China's core interests, is to further demonstrate Chinese strategic capability. And we have seen China doing this across the board, most recently demonstrated by its very impressive military parade on September the 3rd. But at the same time, I think I agree with your question that there is a risk that China hasn't fully appreciated how other countries are developing genuine concerns. about China's growing power, how China intends to utilize this growing power when it comes to its nuclear buildup. For example, China has offered very little information about the end goal of its historic nuclear expansion. How many more nuclear weapons does China want to build? Is China want to build an equally powerful arsenal with the United States, or even bigger than the American arsenal? And what's the rationale? What's the military rationale behind it? Is China going to be more willing to threaten nuclear use in a future conflict? Very little information is revealed, including the most recent white paper on arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation. And regionally, we are seeing increasing reactions from actors in the neighborhood to China's military development. There is an emerging missile arms race in Asia Pacific and even beyond Asia Pacific, which is very much, I think, caused by China's own increasing arsenal of theater range missile systems. But there hasn't been much recognition in Beijing about the need for China to reassure the region and the international community. But if regional countries and rest of the international community express a greater need for China to be more transparent, for China to offer reassurance, I think China will respond. As China competes with the United States, it has a strong interest in maintaining its image of a responsible major power. So I think more expressions of interest or the need for reassurance will help Beijing further refine its approach towards building strategic power.
One final point on nuclear. Beijing is on the track to amass 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030, up from 200 in 2019. These are the Pentagon estimates. We don't know for sure. The US policy makers are pushing to evaluate the size and composition of US nuclear force. When we talk about a nuclear, first of all, is it another nuclear arms race specifically between China and the US? And specifically, where are the policies? Are we talking about China being able to launch an attack just as it's being attacked? I think you call it the second launch?
Second strike.
Second strike. Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, I think China...
And we're not casting or predicting a nuclear war, but it's just studying the capabilities more.
Unfortunately, I think we are in the early stage of a renewed nuclear arms race. China had maintained a rather small arsenal of about 200 weapons for decades. And today, according to US government assessment, the arsenal has already grown to more than 600, with projected a number of 1,000 by end of this decade and potentially 1,500 by 2035. US is already responding very intensively to this trend. The reason the US has not responded very actively to the Russian proposal of extending the New START nuclear arms control agreement between US and Russia for another year is because Washington doesn't want to be further bound by the US-Russian bilateral arms control framework. It wants to have more options to hedge against expanding Chinese capability. And President Trump's project on Golden Dome to build a comprehensive strategic defensive capability to protect American homeland is also very much driven by this concern about Chinese capability. So the capability aside, we also are seeing important changes in China's operational nuclear posture. One important departure from China's traditional policy is China is now developing the capability to conduct so-called launch on warning. So these building a comprehensive strategic early warning system with satellites and large ground-based radars so that once the sensors detect an incoming strategic strike, the leadership in Beijing would have the option to immediately authorize nuclear retaliation. The risk is when China is focusing so much on expanding and demonstrating strategic capability, it is putting less attention to addressing the consequent risks, including this posture of launch on warning, because under modern technological environment, we have missiles that can change flight trajectory during flight. We have missiles that can be armed with either conventional warheads or nuclear warheads. So the Cold War posture that has been maintained by US and Russia about immediately launching nuclear retaliation without being able to predict precisely the end destination of an incoming strike, without being able to really tell whether the incoming strike is nuclear in nature or conventional in nature, I think that raises a lot of risk of false alarm or incidental nuclear war. But so far, these factors haven't been adequately considered. It also raises question about in the Chinese system where the political leadership used to keep tight control over strategic capabilities. And now you have to respond very quickly under 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That gives the military great power to prepare retaliatory options. So in a way, it is stripping away the political control of China's strategic capability. So there are many, I think, interesting pieces we need to monitor and better understand its implications.
And I think technology and AI is also helping in that matter. I mean, the Lebanese have witnessed firsthand during the last war what AI and technology can do. I think there have been a lot of questions of how some strikes and assassinations have been conducted here in Lebanon. Probably a lot of technology has been used by Israel. And this brings us also to the AI and technological capabilities of China. Where is China standing and what's the policy regarding that matter, especially that the US is also on the fast track?
I think China's very strong commitment developing strategic emerging technologies really reflects its deep philosophy that resonates with the Marxist belief that in future great power competition, what determines the outcome of that is your capability to build comprehensive economic power. And then what drives one's economic development is technological development, especially strategic technologies. So that's why you have seen China making such strong commitment. And under Xi Jinping, President Xi also shows a strong belief that one key advantage of the Chinese system in future competition with the United States is it can concentrate state resource and power into a few selected areas. AI, autonomous weapons, aerospace, etc., were clearly emphasized in China's 15th five-year plan. In fact, under Xi's push to build a so-called new form of productive power, these strategic technologies receive even greater attention going forward. And many Chinese strategists are very confident that we will see a further explosion of China's technological breakthroughs for the next 5 years. AI is, I think, viewed as being hopeful to help not only give China's advantage in strategic competition with the United States, but also helping address China's long-term challenges, including its aging population. AI might be able to solve China's challenge of increasing or expected shortage of labor force, but it also comes with trade-offs that it may increase China's unemployment. So there is this potential risk of leading to further unemployment and potential social instability. So it's double-edged sword. And similarly, autonomous technologies is really accelerating China's comprehensive industrial capacity, including in the civilian sectors and military sectors. We have seen China showcasing its very modern and very automated factory that can roll out cruise missiles in huge numbers. Those are being made by robots. So on the other hand, when China further incorporates autonomous technology, including AI, into its military power, again, will that erode the traditional political control over the military, including when AI is further incorporated into command and control systems, nuclear decision-making systems? What risks will that introduce? Those are great issues to follow.
You write in one of your articles, many in Beijing suspect that if any US president might quietly tolerate China's coercive takeover of Taiwan, it would be Trump. As tensions rise in Asia from South China Sea to Taiwan, how is China recalibrating its strategy, and what's the appetite for confrontation or for stability?
I think we are seeing a really important change in China's vision for Taiwan. It is shifting from anti-independence or opposing independence towards promoting unification. So Xi Jinping has made it very clear. China cannot be patient forever. He feels this political responsibility to make progress on the issue of unification for China. That's his, I think, expected legacy as important leader in Chinese history. So we have seen China making comprehensive preparations. The strategy, of course, is to avoid a full-scale invasion, but to demonstrate a strong enough comprehensive power, military power, economic, technological power, even power to shift international narrative, so that the Taiwanese people would understand that they have no choice but to negotiate about its future, about its political future with China. And over time, I think Beijing sees a favorable trend towards China. President Trump demonstrates less political commitment to Taiwan, even though the new national security strategy still says the US wants to maintain the military capability. But the political commitment is clearly decreasing. So maybe that introduces some potential stability going forward, because that will make China believe that it can continue pushing unification without explicitly threatening a war and invasion, but simply being more patient, believing time is on its side, as long as China can continue accumulate greater power. South China Sea and other territorial disputes, including in the East China Sea over Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, I think those are areas where China feels even more comfortable, especially over South China Sea. China has already established very strong military presence. So it's becoming more of a status quo power. And China is using very smart diplomacy, emphasizing the role of ASEAN countries and to divide and conquer. Right now it is focusing on Philippines because it sees the United States is behind Philippines. So the goal is really focused on undermining American influence. As long as US is less committed to defending its allies, I think China feels it will be much easier to resolve those disputes. And in fact, China is more than willing to demonstrate flexibility and accommodate other claimant countries' interest. Vietnam, for example, is actually expanding its man-made islands challenging Chinese interests, but China is keeping relatively silent towards Vietnam. So far, I think South China Sea tensions may has less potential to escalate compared with the Taiwan Strait.
Let's move to the Middle East. I still have 10 minutes. We've seen the China brokering a peace or some kind of breakthrough between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that's the first of its kind in 4 decades of rivalries and tensions between Tehran and Riyadh. Can we say China is more involved in the Middle East? What are China's interests and engagements in the Middle East? His Excellency Marwan Mashar was saying we see more of engagement. Do you really think China is interested in the Middle East? The perception sometimes by some people is that it's not engaged enough.
I think when it comes to economic engagement, I think China sees Middle East as a strategically important region, but it's not a game changer in terms of China's geoeconomic vision. I think China prefers to prioritize its investment in more geopolitically stable places. But we have to say that over the years, we have seen relatively steady Chinese economic investment in this region, even though it's not very balanced. Much of China's FDI is to countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. It has, been increasing economic presence in digital infrastructure sectors, in building, even in financial sectors, providing services, green technologies. So in selected areas, we see more tailored Chinese investment. When it comes to China's political and security role in this region, first, I think China shares some overall interest with other major powers in securing a generally stable region. China's, I think more than 80% of Chinese oil, transit from this region. So China even have a greater interest than the United States in a relatively stable region to maintain open sea lines of communication, etc. But the key factor is China sees this is already being done by the United States. The US is providing overall stability. So there's less perceived need for China to step in. And China appreciates the complexity of regional affairs. It feels that it will need more time to build local connections, expertise, leverage. Its traditional approach to the region is to focusing on elite politics. But for China to have greater leverage on the ground, I think I feel it needs time. But ultimately, I don't think China sees a sense of urgency to make a material commitment to regional security. And it doesn't want to expose itself to greater risks. It is willing to clarify its general principles for promoting peace and stability. It's willing to offer its experiences. It's a little similar to the approach identified in the American national security strategy, right? The U.S. will deploy President Trump's personal time and attention to help maintaining peace and mediating conflict, but it is not willing to commit, real economic inducements or, coercive pressure to make concrete change. One important factor is, China, again, its mindset has been to defending against and hedging against the future uncertainties. It is very good at criticizing the US-led system, including in this region, that hasn't worked perfectly, but hasn't really thought deeply about how to build a better system that might work better than the current system. So it doesn't have a concrete vision for how to advance this principled vision like two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian problem. So I think overall, we'll see China be more willing to step in because this is aligned with its overall interest in becoming a global power. It wants to play a greater role to mediate regional tensions, but it's taking a very careful and incremental approach to Middle East.
I'm running out of time. So can we see, because China maintains a very good relationship with Israel, but we've also seen some positive sentiments towards the Palestinians, the Palestinian state by the Chinese. Are we going to see a similar deal being brokered between on the Israeli-Palestinian front, similar to the Saudi-Iranian one? Is there any appetite for this?
I think the Saudi-Iranian case is a separate case. It was like low-hanging fruit for China. Other regional countries, Iraq, Oman, already done a lot of work to pave the ground. And I think Saudi Arabia was interested in reaching out to China because of China's strategic partnership with Iran. And one advantage of China is it is more willing to promote silent diplomacy. So that a few stars aligned in the perfect time that helped reach this normalization agreement. But when it comes to much more complex issues like Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's just no strong internal demand for China to do more. The Chinese people, they watch what is happening, but they see the United States as being the primary reason for regional chaos. They think when the U.S. declines or decreases its presence in the region, it will automatically becomes more stable. And again, I don't see China now really having concrete ideas about how to drive specific changes towards its envisioned two-state solution. And again, it may need time for China to transition from its elite democracy to broader expertise, leverage, and resources for it to play a more concrete role in mediating.
A lot more to discuss, but I'm sure everyone is looking forward to lunch. Thank you, Carnegie, and thank you, Tong Zhao, for this conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.